Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the Supremely Enlightened One. Sad, sad, sad. Namo Buddhaya. Venerable Bhantes, meritorious lay disciples, we always need to remember just how fortunate we are to have this human birth, to have these minds that can think about things. For the most part, beings are born in places where they can't think about things wisely. So we have these wonderful minds that can make use of what our senses bring in, can make use of what we see, what we hear, and we can think about these things. So we need to be very careful how we use our minds, what we put into our minds, because that affects the way that we act. It affects our lives right now. It affects future lives as well. So today we get the chance again to listen to teachings from the Supreme Buddha, and we can use our minds to think about these teachings, to examine them, to think, how can I relate this to my own life? That the Supreme Buddha wasn't teaching about someone else's life. He was teaching about our own lives. That we can think, how is my life passing away? When he teaches his disciples to think, these days and nights are relentlessly passing. How am I spending my time? Then we don't think, well, that was important for the monks and nuns in the time of the Supreme Buddha. It doesn't relate to me. We have to think for ourselves. My life is passing away very, very quickly, minute by minute. So how do I spend my time? Do I spend my time in a way that my wholesome qualities increase and my unwholesome qualities decrease? At the end of the day, can I say that I've done things that increase my wisdom or that decrease my wisdom? That I do things that I regret? That I do things that make me very happy when I think about them? So we're very fortunate to be disciples of the Supreme Buddha, who taught us so many different ways to do things that we can be happy about, didn't he? He taught us about merit, that it's actually possible to do things for ourselves that improve our lives, improve our life here and now, and improve our chances to have a fortunate rebirth. So he taught us that we can practice generosity. And here, living in a very wealthy country like this, you have many opportunities to practice generosity, don't you? Even if we gave away half of our things, right, compared to most people in the world, we'd probably be pretty wealthy still, wouldn't we? But the Supreme Buddha taught us, even if just we share the last bite of food that we have, that there's merit in that. He didn't say you need to give a huge gift, that you need to feed 1,000 people, or that you need to end hunger completely. Right? If you're concerned about getting a spot in the evening news, well, then you have to either do something bad, something even that's not terribly bad might get you on the evening news. But if you want to do something good and get on the evening news, you have to do something really, really big, don't you? But fortunately, we don't have to worry about getting on the news, do we? We know that whatever little merit we collect adds up. So even if we just make a habit of a very small kind of generosity, a very small thing, just looking at those people around us and thinking, do I have something that they need? Can I make their life more comfortable, happier, by practicing generosity in some way? The Supreme Buddha taught us about these precepts. And we're very lucky to receive them in such a pure way and to have confidence that it's actually possible to keep these precepts. Some people, they even know about the precepts, but then they don't believe that it's possible to still keep the precepts. Right? There are actually people who've heard the teachings of the Supreme Buddha, but they think, the time for keeping precepts, that's over. Right? People think this way. They think, you have to tell lies. You have to steal things now and then. You have to kill living beings. People think that it's not possible to keep the 5 precepts, and they lose this chance. They've come so close, right? They're just like us. They've had the chance to hear about the precepts, even hear about the benefits, but they don't believe that it's possible to keep them. So they don't even try. Or if they try, maybe they just try for a day and then they give up. The Supreme Buddha also taught us about another way of making merit, didn't he? Practicing meditation. That this is the most powerful kind of merit, isn't it? And we don't need to be rich to do this. We don't need to be famous or popular. We have a mind right here, right now. The Supreme Buddha said, even for a very, very short time, if we can practice these meditations, it brings great benefit. That we may not see the benefit right away, but that it adds up. Do you remember the simile of the dripping drops of water? The Supreme Buddha said that you should never look down on just a little bit of merit, thinking that it doesn't really amount to anything. It doesn't really matter. He said, just like a water pot that sits under a drop of water, right? If you've had a drippy faucet, right? Maybe it only drips every minute, and it doesn't seem like a lot of water. But if you put a pan under that, when you wake up the next morning, it'll definitely have enough water to take a nice drink. The Supreme Buddha said in the same way, these little bits of merit that we do, they add up. They help us develop our mind. Because if we only think that we can do big things, well then we'll let the opportunity pass by. But we have to train little bit by little bit. Maybe you're very young and you think you don't have much to give. But if you keep your eyes open, you can always find the chance to give something. You can always find the opportunity to develop wholesome qualities in your mind. There are many, many reasons in the world to get angry, aren't there? You don't have to go very far out in the world to find people who are very rude, who'll be mean to you, who'll treat you unfairly. And if you go to an ordinary friend and you've been treated unfairly and you explain what happened to that friend, they'll say, yeah, they did you wrong, right? You should be mad at them. You yelled at them? Good, they deserved it. Right? That's what an ordinary friend does. But a good friend, a Kalyanamitta, will say, you know what, friend? There's many foolish people in the world. If we get angry every time we come across a foolish person, a person with hatred, a person with greed, with ignorance, we'll be angry all the time. So friend, no need to be angry. Practice loving kindness. Have compassion for that person. And then, in that moment, if we're able to develop these thoughts of loving kindness, we collect huge amounts of merit. Huge amounts of merit. An ordinary person might even think that we're foolish. This is the way that people think, that if someone gets angry at you, you need to fight back. That if you don't get angry back, then people will just take advantage of you. But the Supreme Buddha said that when someone treats us badly, someone gets angry at us, and we don't get angry back, then we're doing something good for that person, and we're doing something good for ourselves as well, aren't we? That us getting angry, it's not going to help that person. Nobody's keeping score in this life in that way. So if we don't get angry, then maybe that other person, their anger will reduce, or at least not get worse. And if we don't get angry, then we won't have any regret about our actions. And when we leave the presence of that person, then we leave the situation behind. But if we let our mind get angry, what happens? All day long we think about that. We think about the bad thing that they did to us. Then maybe someone else comes up to us who's very innocent, and we yell at that person. They didn't do anything to us at all, but because we kept that anger in our mind, it slipped out of our mouth very easily. And now we've really hurt ourselves. So in this way, the Supreme Buddha taught us how we can move forward in our lives, how we can increase our happiness here and now, and how we can have happiness later. So today, we'll listen to another sutta from the Itivuttaka, the section of the twos, the Vijja Sutta, the 13th sutta in the section of the twos. So this was said by the Lord, said by the Arahant, so I heard. Ignorance, bhikkhus, proceeds and leads to unwholesome states, and shamelessness and lack of fear of wrongdoing follow after. Knowledge, bhikkhus, proceeds and leads to wholesome states, and shame and fear of wrongdoing follow after. So this shamelessness, this shame and fear of wrongdoing, hiri and ottappa, the Supreme Buddha says that these are the great protectors of the world. So what's the first one, the hiri? This is the sense that we have that something's not a good thing to do. Some people have that, some people don't have that, right? You may know people who don't have any problem at all stealing or killing, right? Especially insects, right? In this world, for the most people, have a very clear line about who you can kill and who you can't kill, right? They would say, right, a human being, very bad. Shouldn't kill a human being. An animal, Well, most animals you probably shouldn't kill, right? If you killed someone's pet, you get into a lot of trouble, right? But then you keep going down, then they're very small animals, like mice and rats. If they go into someone's house, the person feels that they have a right to kill them, that they have to protect their house, protect their family. So then the line has been crossed. Killing's okay. Or if there's insects, right, down to a mosquito, very normal thing. Right? Instead of brushing it away, you just smush it. Some people's houses, right, the walls cover with little spots where people just smush the mosquitoes and never think about it again. A few minutes later, they don't even remember that they did it. They may do it without even thinking. But the Supreme Buddha teaches us that we want to develop this sense in our minds, that this is a bad thing to do. This feeling that it's not good to kill. Even when we kill accidentally, we feel a little bad that it happened. But that especially this urge to kill something, we have to completely remove it from our minds. Right? Because if we believe that there's this sort of continuum, this hierarchy, right? We start with killing one thing, and then we get used to killing that and killing something bigger and something bigger. And then, somebody's dog comes on our property and destroys our flower bed, and we say, well, they shouldn't have come here. And people do that. They set out poison, right, for cats and dogs to eat that come on their property. So we need to develop this inherent feeling of disgust for doing bad things. If we tell a lie, to really have a sense that, I didn't need to do that. We feel kind of embarrassed when we've done it. We realize we were trying to protect our reputation or try to not get in trouble. And we feel like, that was just a bad thing to do. Now I have to go to that person and tell them, I told a lie. What I said wasn't true. You can't always believe the things that I say. So then that gets us to the next one, ottappa. This fear of the results of the actions that we do. So we start out with a general disgust towards bad behavior. And then the second part is being afraid of the bad results of these actions, being afraid of the blame that other people will give to us. So the Supreme Buddha said that these two things, they protect the world. That if someone can develop these two things, then they'll be safe from actions that will lead them to bad destinations. So let's listen to this. Let's listen to this again. Ignorance, bhikkhus, precedes and leads to unwholesome states, and shamelessness and lack of fear of wrongdoing follow after. Knowledge, bhikkhus, precedes and leads to wholesome states, and shame and fear of wrongdoing follow after. So now let's listen to the verses because it explains in a bit more detail. So this is the meaning of what the Lord said. So in regard to this it was said, whatever bad borns there are, so whatever bad births, bad places to be reborn, in this world and hereafter, all are rooted in ignorance, constructed by greed, constructed by desire and greed. Since one of evil desires is shameless and disrespectful, from that evil flows forth, and he goes to a state of misery. Thus, by discarding desire and greed, along with ignorance as well, a bhikkhu arouses knowledge and abandons all bad borns. So whatever bad borns there are, whatever bad places there are to be reborn, in this world and hereafter, all are rooted in ignorance, constructed by desire and greed. So, is someone born in the animal world because they're a very generous person? No, because they're a very greedy person. Is someone born in the ghost world because they were very, very wise? They reflected on the nature of this body, right? That it's filled with disgusting things. And so because of that, they're reborn in a place that they eat disgusting things. Is that how it works? No. No. Just the opposite. So beings that don't reflect wisely on, for example, the nature of this body. They have lots of greed for this body. They have lots of greed for the bodies of other people as well. So because of this ignorance, they're reborn in bad destinations. Since one of evil desires is shameless and disrespectful, from that evil flows forth, and he goes to a state of misery. So because someone is ignorant, they're reborn in a bad destination. And when they're in that bad destination, they don't have any fear of doing bad deeds. They don't have any fear of the blame that they'll get from other people. Right? We don't expect this animal world to be a very kind place, do we? Maybe we can see the parents of an animal feeding it for a little while, not very long usually. And then after that, the animal's on its own, the little baby's on its own. Sometimes even the parents chase it out, very angrily, because they don't want competition. But for the most part, the animal world is all about stealing things, right? Stealing things, eating things, killing other living beings. Then the last verse. Thus, by discarding desire and greed, along with ignorance as well, a bhikkhu arouses knowledge and abandons all bad borns. So this is the goal that we're trying to achieve. That if we can get rid of all of our ignorance, if we can get rid of this desire, this greed, then we don't have to be reborn in a bad destination. That a person without any ignorance, they don't take rebirth. They don't even take rebirth in a good destination. If they've completely removed their ignorance, then they don't ever have to suffer again. Because we remember very carefully that even beings in the heavenly realms, they have to pass away. They don't get to experience those heavenly pleasures forever. Why is that? Because they still have this ignorance. So we can listen to the verses one more time. Whatever bad borns there are, in this world and hereafter, all are rooted in ignorance, constructed by desire and greed. Since one of evil desires is shameless and disrespectful. From that, evil flows forth, and he goes to a state of misery. Thus, by discarding desire and greed, along with ignorance as well, a bhikkhu arouses knowledge and abandons all bad borns. This too is the meaning of what was said by the Lord. So I heard. Sad, sad, sad. So the next sutta. Deprived of wisdom. This was said by the Lord, said by the Arahant. So I heard. Bhikkhus, those beings are thoroughly deprived who are deprived of noble wisdom. Do you know what it means to be deprived? No, because you're not. You're not deprived of anything in this world, probably. You have all the food you need, right? Do you ever open the refrigerator and it's completely empty? Have you ever done that? No, you're very, very lucky. So when we say that someone leads a deprived life, it means they don't get things. They don't get all the food that they need to eat. They don't get good clothes to wear, clothes that fit. They don't get good opportunities. But the Supreme Buddha talks about the most important thing to be deprived of. And what's that? Do you remember? Wisdom, noble wisdom. So bhikkhus, those beings are thoroughly deprived, who are deprived of noble wisdom. They live in discomfort, even here and now, with vexation, trouble, and distress. And when the body perishes at death, a bad born is to be expected. So everyone in the world knows about being deprived of material things. You can imagine, maybe you see someone at school who has to wear old clothes, or the lunch that they eat, isn't very good. So we can see that there are people in the world who don't have material things like us. And we can see, how those people, they do have some amount of suffering because of that. But in the Supreme Buddha's Dhamma, he talks about things in a different way, doesn't he? He says that if someone doesn't have wisdom, if someone doesn't have noble wisdom, then that person is really, really poor. He says, the Arahants teach us, if someone is very, very wealthy, but they don't have any wisdom, then that person is really poor. Because when they lose all their possessions, then they have absolutely nothing. They don't have their money, and they don't have anything good going on in their mind. But someone who has wisdom, they don't need any material things to be happy. So someone who doesn't have wisdom, the Supreme Buddha says, they live in discomfort, even here and now, with vexation, so with confusion, trouble, and distress. And when the body perishes at death, a bad born is to be expected. So let's think these reflections that the Supreme Buddha taught us to do, that all those who are dear to me, I'm going to be separated from them. This is the nature of this human life. It's not a surprising thing that we have to be separated from the things that we like, from the people that we love. So, a lot of people, when they hear this wisdom, they may think, I don't want to think about that. Why are you telling me that I'm going to have to lose my children, that I'm going to have to lose my parents? If you go back to school in the fall, and your friends ask you, how did you spend your time? And you say, oh, I went to the Asapua, and the Bhante there, he reminded us again and again, my parents are going to die. My brother and sister are going to die. My pets, they're going to die. Someday I'm going to lose all my possessions. Right? Either before I die or when I die, I'm going to lose everything that I love. Do you think your friends will be jealous? Do you think they'll say, oh, I wish you would have invited me to come along. I should think more often about my parents' death. Will they say that? No. Why? They don't have any wisdom. They haven't had the chance to learn these things. Because ordinary people, they do whatever they can to try and forget these facts. They're like try to keep it a secret thing. Because in the world, people don't have any comfort from that. Because all their happiness is based on their relationships, based on the material things. It's not surprising. The Supreme Buddha said, sensual pleasures, they're nice. If sensual pleasures weren't nice, right? If your toys weren't fun to play with, you wouldn't play with them, right? If nice cars weren't fun to drive, nobody would waste their money on a really nice car, would they? But they're nice to drive, they're nice to ride in. That's why people spend their money that way. So it's not surprising that people are attached to these things. It's a very normal thing. It makes a lot of sense. But if we don't have any wisdom, then as soon as something happens to that car, unhappy. Right? You come out to the parking lot and you see a big dent in the side of the car. Nobody's ever happy to see that, unless they're a very wise person and they say, yep, that's part of the contract. When you buy a car, right, it's not even in the fine print, even in the tiny little details. It doesn't say, this car is going to get dents in it. If you keep it long enough, it will rust. And if it hits into something, it may get totally destroyed. I don't think you can read that in any manual for a car, can you? But it's still true. It's still the truth. It's still reality. And so, if somebody buys a car with the thought, yep, this car, it's going to be a lot of suffering. It's going to break when I don't want it to break. It may start to smell. Right now it has a nice smell, but that smell will definitely change. All the little gadgets that work so well now, they're definitely going to break. So if someone has wisdom, then no matter what happens to that car, their mind doesn't have to change. But if someone doesn't have wisdom, then they have a lot of suffering. Right? If someone has a child that dies, right? This is another thing that people expect a certain thing when they have a child, or even just when they get pregnant. Right? Someone gets pregnant and they have the idea, that means I'm going to have a baby. But it definitely doesn't. Right? Many times, babies are never born because they die before that. It's a very, very normal thing. Very, very normal. We don't talk about it a lot, but it happens very, very frequently. Right? So there's no promise. Even if a child is born, parents right away they start saving for college. They start thinking about what this child will achieve, how kind the child is going to be, all the child's good qualities. Right? They may even start planning for, asking right away, when's the children's program at the Asapua? right? The child's still in diapers, but they're already thinking, I want them to come and learn here at the Asapur. Very wholesome things, right? Totally blameless, unless we really have that expectation that it's going to happen. Because there's no guarantee, there's no contract that we sign that says, our children are going to live longer than us. So when it does happen, that a child dies, ordinary people say, oh, you don't deserve that, it's a terrible shame. But a wise person, they think, this is the nature of the world. It's the sort of thing that happens. It's not strange, it's not unusual in this long round of samsara. In the animal world, an animal may have 7 or 8 babies, and most of them may die from disease or, in the animal world, it's a very, very dangerous place. And so other animals come and they eat these vulnerable babies. And in the human world, maybe no one comes and eats the baby, but anything can happen. There's no guarantees. And so when it happens that a child dies, sometimes people lose their minds because of this ignorance that they have. Their whole world just falls apart. Their marriage breaks up. They don't realize this is actually, it's part of the deal that sometimes children die before their parents. So again, bhikkhus, those beings are thoroughly deprived who are deprived of noble wisdom. They live in discomfort, even here and now, with vexation, trouble, and distress. And when the body perishes at death, a bad born is to be expected. Those beings are not deprived, who are not deprived of noble wisdom. They live in comfort here and now, without vexation, trouble, or distress. And when the body perishes, at death, a good born is to be expected. So someone who has wisdom, they're not shaken by the nature of reality. They don't try and pretend that it's not the case. A wise person, if you have a really wise friend at home, and you tell them that you've been listening to these teachings, they'll say, that's really true. That's really true. I had a grandmother, a grandfather, an aunt, an uncle, maybe even a brother or sister who died this summer. If only I had been thinking about this like you're thinking about it, then certainly, it wouldn't have been so shocking. I could have expected it to happen. So someone who has this wisdom, they can have a peaceful mind no matter what happens. It's hard to imagine, isn't it, that someone could have a peaceful mind if a child died. Remember the story of the family, the father and the son would go out to work in the field every day, and the wife would send food for them to eat. And one day the son got bitten by a snake and died right there on the spot. And the father didn't, pick up the son and run home screaming. All he did was he sent a message to his wife saying, "Today, just one meal. We only need one meal." Why? Because he was very wise. And when the wife got the message, she didn't She didn't scream. She knew exactly what must have happened. She thought, there's only one reason why he could only need one meal. My son must have died. Let me gather the family together and take this meal to my husband. And Sakka, when he saw this, he couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. That the father wasn't crying, the mother wasn't crying, the sister wasn't crying, the wife wasn't crying, the servant wasn't crying. So he went and he asked them, one by one, surely this must have been a very bad son, and that's why you're happy that he died, right? He must have done many bad things. He must have treated you harshly. You must be happy that he's gone. And they all, one by one, said, No. This is the nature of things. What good will it do me to cry? If I do that, then my friends will also be sad, my enemies will be happy. There's no point in crying over him. We didn't invite him to come into this world with us. He didn't ask our permission to go. Why should we be sad? This is the nature of the world. Amazing thing, isn't it? This is what would happen when very virtuous people, very wise people would experience a situation like this. The throne that Sakka would sit on would get hot, right? That he'd say, something must be going on in the world. Because it's very unusual, isn't it? Even today, if parents didn't cry when a child died, people would say, oh, he's in denial, right? He's not willing to admit what's happened. Or maybe he killed the child. Right? Even worse things to accuse a person of. That's how rare it is that someone can overcome this form of attachment, this very, very deep attachment that we have to those that we love. The only way we have any chance is again and again to reflect on these things. So this is the meaning of what the Lord said. So in regard to this, it was said, see the world with its devas, destitute of wisdom, established in name and form, nama-rupa, conceiving this to be the truth. Wisdom, which leads to penetration, is the best thing in the world. By this, one completely understands the ending of both birth and being. Devas and human beings hold dear those awakened ones, ever mindful, possessing joyous wisdom, bearing their final bodies. So we can think about the story of Sunita, the flower gatherer. Remember, his job was to clear away the old dead flowers. People would offer them at a shrine and just go away and leave them there. And the place would start to get filled up with flowers. And this was a very low job, wasn't it? He didn't have to have any special skill. And he was dealing with rotten things. Right? If you've ever had to clean up the flowers right here at the Asapua, sometimes after people throw away all the dead flowers, the kitchen is very, very smelly, isn't it? You have to open up the windows, right? So this is what he was having to deal with every single day. But then he saw the Supreme Buddha and asked permission to become a monk. And when he did that work very, very well. He worked very, very hard. And he achieved wisdom. He put an end to this round of samsara. And then Sakka and Brahma went to see him, to pay homage to him. Before he had wisdom, even ordinary people wouldn't like to look at him. But once he has wisdom, then gods come to worship him, come to bow down at his feet. Because even heavenly beings can appreciate wisdom. It's rare to find wisdom in the world, but there are some heavenly beings who really appreciate this wisdom. For the most part, human beings, they worship heavenly beings, don't they? But the Supreme Buddha explained that it should actually be the other way around. That when someone has removed all of their greed, all of their hatred, all of their delusion, when someone lives unshaken in the world, even by very serious things, their mind doesn't get upset. That those beings, that the gods worship them. So this too is the meaning of what was said by the Lord. So I heard. Sad, sad, sad.